All right, let's go ahead and get started. As I said, we've got a pretty busy schedule to keep for this meeting. My name is Shelley Moore. I am with the Moore Institute for Plastic Pollution Research and with San Francisco Estuary Institute. And I'm the chair of the Trash Monitoring Work Group. And we were created not too long ago as part of the Water Quality Monitoring Council. We're basically a work group looking at monitoring of trash, and we're basically the people who are doing it, and we get together and talk about some of the different issues and some things that we can do in order to work together. So let me go ahead and show you what our agenda is for today, and you can see that here. We've got a couple of people who are giving some really great presentations. Actually more than a couple. We've got 4 people, and what I'm excited to have a really stellar lineup for today. We've also got the Google Cloud team to talk about some of their machine learning work that they've been working on, and we're going to talk at the very end about starting up a microplastics subcommittee as well. Right now we have 3 subcommittees, and those subcommittees are encampments, and you can see who the leaders are, data standardization, management, and coordination. And we also have a citizen science subcommittee. And the citizen science subcommittee, at this point, we're looking for people to step up to be leaders for that group. Our 2 leaders have moved on to different positions most recently, and so I'll be hitting you guys up later to see if there's anyone interested in stepping up to serve as co-chair on the citizen science group. And again, we're going to talk about starting a microplastics subcommittee as well. So the subcommittees have a lot of different things that they're working on, but major goals are to support programs and people that are monitoring for trash and provide the data in an open way. We support the Water Quality Monitoring Council, and we develop and recommend guidance for different things. So our basic role is to provide information to those who are making decisions about the environment around trash. And so we want to make sure that we're all on the same page. I wanted to list these goals for you guys. I would recommend that you sign up for our listserv so that you get emails that will notify you when there are meetings. And you basically do that by entering on this page your email address and your full name, and then click on the general interest button and choose California Trash Monitoring Work Group, and then hit the subscribe button. There's other groups you can subscribe to too, and I would recommend doing that as well. There's not really a lot of emails that go out relative to all this, and it really does keep you informed. Hold on a second. All right. So I recommend doing that. The other thing I wanted to let you know about before we get started is that there were a series of trash webinars that were put on starting in January. And you can see from this list that there were some different sponsors for this group. And we were one of them, the Trash Monitoring Work Group. And there were, as I said, a number of different subjects that were touched upon in these webinars. You can see the whole list here. Our last one, September 30th, was on microplastics and getting that all kicked off. And I want to thank Scott Coffin and my other co-leader, Eric Burris, for helping us put this together and getting it to happen. It happened on September 30th, and those videos are now available. If you missed it and you want to watch them, you can actually go to a website and see any of the webinar videos. They're all recorded and all present on this website. So if you want the links, or you want a copy of this presentation so you can get some of the links, I will post it later and send it out with the link to the video for today's meeting as well. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we're gonna get going pretty quickly. I'll ask, are there any questions before we get started? All right. So let me go ahead and introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker is, his name is Diego Sancho Gallegos. He's with the Save the Waves Foundation, and he is their surf conservation data coordinator. And he's got degrees actually, he's got degrees from Stanford University and is very passionate about understanding and protecting our coastal environments. He brings his background in marine science, data pipelines, and mapping to contribute to the Save the Waves mission. And he's going to talk about an application, a mobile application that they created to inform, to let surfers basically have the ability to inform people about things that are happening on the beaches. So Diego, I will turn it over to you. Let me make sure that you can share your screen. You should be able to, and you're good to go.
Great, thank you so much, Shelley. That was a great intro. I appreciate the kind words. I will share my screen and let me know if you see the Google Slides presenting now.
Yep.
Awesome. And just to check that the slides are changing, yeah?
Yep.
Cool. Great. So yeah, as Shelley mentions, I work at Save the Waves Coalition. We're a nonprofit that focuses on coastal conservation through the lens of surf ecosystems, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in the presentation. But generally, I just wanted to, the way we've been engaging with the trash monitoring groups, data subcommittee specifically, was because the app generates, the goal of this app is to crowdsource threats to the coastlines, and some of these threats are trash related, and so we wanted to engage and see what we could do to perhaps start solving these threats or connect some of the threats that users are posting on the app with practitioners on the ground that can help us try to solve them systematically, or different, if anyone is doing projects that could benefit from this kind of citizen science, either in the data collection part or the data analysis parts. All the the platform is built, and we're more than happy to partner with anyone. The data is freely available online on our website, and anyone can post to the app. It's just downloading. So I will give you more context into what all of that means, but I just wanted to start the conversation with that. So yeah, as Shelley was mentioning, I work at Save the Waves, and our mission is to protect surf ecosystems across the globe. We work mostly everywhere we work is in coalition with local partners. So the local partners are general organizations that want to protect their surf resources or their coastlines, and they partner with us, and we bring in kind of the know-how, different frameworks that help them kind of protect these important places for them. Our main goal right now, our big objective, is to protect 1,000 surf ecosystems by 2030. We have about between 200 and 300 that are already protected or in process of protection through very many different ways, legally and involving different community-based sort of work. But what I'm here to talk about is the app, which the app was kind of, we built it with the idea that there is a lack of data, education, and engagement on an everyday basis to confront the most pressing issues facing the world's coastlines. And this is like a general blanket statement that I'm sure resounds with a lot of you. And there's many ways to get at this problem, because we're on this like very niche sort of group that is, surfers and beachgoers. We wanted to take advantage of the fact that, surfers and beachgoers and divers and different kinds of coastal users spend so much time on the beach and on the coast and near the ocean. So we created this app as a way for them to, on a very simple everyday basis, like they can always engage, and if they see a problem, they can report it, monitor it through this app. And so we built the platform with that in mind, but we also built it to be open to any organization that could benefit from such a tool to use it as well. And so that's kind of the main idea of it. The objectives, as I said, are to engage the beachgoers to help protect your coast. So it doesn't have to be surfers. That's kind of the niche we work in because no one else really does that kind of work. And it's a very large group that can be easily mobilized. But generally, anyone who spends time by the coast can use this app and should be using this app to help monitor and protect our coasts. And then the second bullet point, which is to provide solutions to user identified coastal threats. That's what we're really pushing for because, an app is only so useful if you see the results of the work or the posts or reports that you're putting on the app as a user. So we want to be able to tell the user, okay, like you're spending a minute of your day posting these threats. This is what we're doing to solve them. This is who we're working with. And that kind of segues into the third bullet point, which is expanding our networks of coalition partners. As I said, we work around the globe, but we're headquartered in California. So, we want to kind of start and have a strong partnership and coalition in California with different practitioners. And so that's, where we see some potential collaboration opportunities. But to go into the app a little bit, the app is basically has its 6 different categories, and then it has a 7th general category. So if a threat, so to speak, doesn't fall into any of these, it can be tagged as a general issue. And all of these have subcategories. Obviously, some of them are not as relevant to this group. So I will mostly stick to the plastic trash and marine debris. But these are kind of all the different issues we're trying to work in to some extent or other. Obviously, very difficult to tackle all of them. So it's we're at different levels of engagement with all of them. But for the trash subcategories, we have these as the main or as the different options that people can choose when they're reporting anything trash related. So plastic packaging, microplastics, fishing gear, and then there's that other trash threat. So that one is commonly picked out if it's a mix of these 3, or if it's something that doesn't fall into one single category, there's always that other option. And so that's kind of like the resolution of the data. We get, and I'll show this in a bit, but we get where it's picked up from or where the photo was taken and what time. So we get a timestamp and location, and then this is kind of the category that it gets tagged on under. And then there's a description that the user also inputs. So sometimes there's more or less information, but that's at times can be very valuable as well. Let me see. Oh, there we go. Yeah. So how the app works is super simple. You obviously download it, and then all the user has to do is take a photo, whatever problem there is, whether it's trash or erosion or anything. Then from the menu, you select a threat and then write a short description, and then your phone knows where you are generally at all times. So you can just geotag it based on that on your phone's data, and your post will alert us and the public to that thread, and we will connect that thread hopefully with practitioners who can start solving it or add it to their bank of like data that can help drive potential like either projects or policies. And so this is a quick video that shows what that looks like on a phone. So you just give the app some access to your photos. Select the photo that you took, and then there's your threat categories. In this case, I think this is like trash and fishing gear. So select fishing gear, and then just describe fishing gear at the beach. And then it geolocates it based on, you just click on location, select your current location, and you click done. And then we ask for a contact just in case there's any need for follow-ups, and just to make sure it's not a bot that's putting that into our database. But and then there's that other, at the very end, there's a take action button that shows up, which allows users to go a step further and engage with some organizations that are already partnering with us or some of the local practitioners. That in our sort of the way we're making it look like, it's like, say someone reports trash and collects a little bit of trash on the beach, takes a photo, posts that it's a problem. Then we're trying to link with that take action button with organizations that are doing beach cleanups, for example, or like further resources to take on that initial effort that the person already did and take it a step further. And so let me just So, and then, yeah, for the last thing I wanted to mention is we are currently doing this Dirty Wave Challenge, which might be of interest to some citizen science organizations or other organizations that can, put people together and organize a way to monitor threats and then also solve them. The competition is global, and what we're doing is just asking users to post photos as they would normally do, and they'd enter this Dirty Wave Challenge, and we're giving away a $5,000 stewardship grant to address the issue that they're reporting on the app. Generally, what we're looking for in entries are, threats that are urgent and can be solved by a 5,000 stewardship grant. So like, we're not going to solve, ocean plastics by a 5,000 stewardship grant, but we can solve small things like, a beach has a problem of litter because they don't have a trash can. So we can start working with the local community to like put on trash can signs, like kind of that. Some sort of stewardship project that goes beyond just reporting. That's kind of the goal. And the more community support that the entries show, the greater the chances. So like if it's just one person trying to take on the world versus like a community that shows that this is an issue that keeps on popping up, we also give that higher priority. And generally we touch base with the higher or our top contenders for this challenge will be contacted before we select the winner, just to make sure that there is the capacity to run these projects on the ground. And yeah, so that's a quick introduction to Save the Waves and the app, and as a tool and platform that hopefully is useful to some of you. And yeah, if you have any questions, comments, I'm more than happy to answer.
Great, thank you, Diego. Does anybody have any questions for Diego? So I have a question. The app is available now, and all of those different categories are available to enter data, even though like the water quality and that kind of stuff.
Yep, it's live now. They're all the categories are live as well. You can download for iOS or Android. And I'll put the link that can link you to the app on whatever app or Android store you need on the chat so that you can check it out. But yeah, it's all live and working now.
Awesome.
Tony, do you have a question?
Yeah, Diego. First of all, congratulations on your app. It's really great to see it's doing a real valuable service. I wanted to ask about the connection of the kind of like management questions that someone might pose, and then the way the data that the app can furnish. So if someone wants to understand if trash on a particular beach is getting better or worse, is there a way that people can register that that a beach is clean? Are they incentivized to do that, or is it just about identifying problem areas? Because if you just see an absence of submissions, does that indicate things are good? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. Thanks for the question. And I think it's part of the things we've been considering. So right now, there isn't a way to say things are great. It's mostly like for negative things, which we want to be like hopefully our next version will have a way to say if this threat is resolved, so that everyone who uses the app can see that it's no longer a problem when they see it on the map. But it's also what we also want the app to be is kind of a paper trail for all these different threats through time, because that allows you to see like seasonal changes, yearly changes, if it was a really like stormy year versus not like a drier year. That kind of thing is important to understand kind of from like a user standpoint what you see based on the different changes and kind of climate change and how those patterns are starting to change. But yeah, right now it's mostly focused on the negatives, unfortunately. It is a problem when because absence technically would mean that the beach is clean, but it could also mean that we just don't have users there, and that's really why there is absence right now more than anything. So I think from that point of view, it's a little trickier, but we're hoping to at least address the solved issue in the near future.
Cool, thank you.
Welcome. Yeah, Gary. think.
Hey, Diego, congratulations on getting the app going. It looks fantastic. I think it's going to serve a great purpose. My question is, how much data you guys have already coming in? And if you have sort of a target user base that you're shooting for, and kind of what are the marketing channels you're thinking of to try to get this into people's hands to get that data streaming in?
Yeah, great question. Thanks for that. So we launched in early May, and basically for this year, we had different partnerships with mostly, since we work in the surf ecosystem space, it's a lot of like brands like Patagonia. I think Kona Brew, the brewery, was also on board they did like a little tour along the West Coast, like pushing the app, and they had like professional surfers go and different beaches. And we also had a few like partnerships like that with like sort of high profile companies. And we've also been doing just like normal apps through like an advertisement company. Because we had this year, like we had funding to really push the app hard. And through the Dirty Wave Challenge, we also kind of use that as an incentive for people to use it in posts. And so right now we're pushing as hard as we can. And the goal really is by, I think, 2023 or 2025 actually, to get to 30,000 users. We're at around 6,000 right now. And data wise, we've had about, I think for like, it varies geographically, obviously. For California, we're at around 200 or so data points, which is small, but also, it hasn't been around that much. And I think that adoption will increase hopefully with time. But yeah, I think that answers all of your questions.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Diego. I think like the position that Save the Waves occupies in the surf community is a great niche to exploit that and get more users. So great to hear about it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Eric,
yeah.
you have a question?
Yeah, hi, Diego. My name's Eric Burris. I help run the citizen science program for the water boards. So I looked over your website, the app. I'll be glad to work with you to get it out to the citizen science community here in California at large. Also, there's a huge need for STEAM tools. I'm getting calls and emails from teachers who are looking for something like this. And if you want to reach them, please contact me. I'll put my contact information in the chat. I'd love to chat with you about this.
Yeah, thanks
for
so much.
creating this kind of a tool.
Awesome. No, that's great. And yes, totally. I've talked to a few people in the education space, and this is like, we'd be more than happy to share it and use it like as an educational tool, as well as, citizen science is really what we're originally aiming for. But the more people that can be positively impacted by it, the better. So I will be reaching out to you for sure. And thanks for letting me know.
Look forward to chatting with you.
Shelley, do you have a question?
I do. Hi, Diego. Thanks so much for your overview of your app. I was wondering with the water quality reporting, if that's all qualitative and just visual, or if it's quantitative as well.
Yeah, unfortunately, most of these, as you can probably imagine, are qualitative and visual. So it's tricky to get high quality data when we're trying to keep the ask as low as possible from users, but also just, I guess, data quality is one of the small things that you have to kind of tweak as you go with citizen science or like community science. And yeah, I think for water quality right now is more of we're flagging where there's poor water quality or like sewage runoff for kind of events like that during storms or during the first big flush of the year, for example, that happened recently. So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
It does. And I actually think that it's great that you're using qualitative water quality data because it really removes the barrier to entry for so many people. So I know it's not necessarily like data, but it definitely opens the doors up to a lot of people.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
I have another question, Diego. The stewardship project that you have for the 5K, is there more information on the website for that?
I will send the link on the chat for that, but there is a lot more information on that on the website.
Awesome. Anybody else have any questions for Diego? All right, thank you, Diego. Much appreciation. I will also add that Diego serves on our data standardization, management, and coordination team and subcommittee, and he's an excellent contributor to that group. So thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you.
All right, our next presentation will be from hold on a second. From the Google Cloud team, and I'm going to turn it over to Walter from Walter Yu from Caltrans to introduce the team. Are they all signed in, Walter?
I told them 1:30, and they're usually a pretty punctual crowd from last week. So how about I do the intro, and then by then let's see if they come on. If
They're
not,
signed in?
if you don't mind, maybe we could switch or skip over us, and they'll be on. But they did confirm, so we're ready to go.
Okay.
So with that said, thanks, Shelley, for the introduction and invitation to participate, present today. So I'm Walter Yu, Program Manager for Clean California, which is our $1 billion litter eradication. So we're calling eradication of litter in our right of way. So, there was assigned by the governor, and it's a pretty comprehensive program. I will go ahead and drop the link in the chat to our external facing website, which let me see here. So we're going to go ahead and drop this in. So it's a comprehensive program, not only for litter abatement, but also for projects. So this includes project beautification projects around safety and landscape architecture and improving the environment, but also with local grant. So there's also local grant programs in a very similar capacity. So it would also be for beautification and improvement of our infrastructure, but of our landscape and visual aspects. And that would be with our local partners. So primarily transit agencies and local agencies. So, if anything, probably, for the local grants program, sorry, let me also try to follow here. It's also got local grants program. And so I would say, be on the lookout for us, as far as getting out there. We do have workshops through the local grants program for project proposals, as well as the beautification projects. And then as far as litter abatement, we'll be out there with our crews. So it's going to be a combination. A lot of it is around job creation. So our crews are not only, these are new hires. So we're actually actively hiring in all the districts. And maybe call to action for attendees here is, if local partners or agencies that are interested in projects and submitted project proposals, check out our website for the proposals under local grants or beautification. We're starting to engage with the community, and then also local hiring from all of our districts, really. So we're doing a lot of hiring for additional maintenance crews beyond what we normally do. And then also we're partnering with particular programs, like Adopt a Highway is another big one. So again, these are for our corporate partners. So really kind of across the spectrum. It's not really even though we're leading it, we're trying to, engage with the community, create jobs, and also spread the wealth, if you will, around the, rather than just doing pickup, we're actually going to do some longer lasting projects and things like that. And also litter public education. So we also have a much bigger budget. I'm sure, that we're happy to share, as far as, and also this program is going to go on for 3 years. So, calendar fiscal years, but 3 years in total. And so this public education campaign would also be, and you can see that on our website, our new slogan is change this to that. So the this of the litter, and then that to the improvement. So there is definitely that strong stormwater connection in all these projects. Let's see if, and maybe I'll pause. Any questions, comments before we dive into the demo of the platform? And I can also speak to that for a little bit. You can also use the chat if there are any questions about the program, Clean California. And then, so the connection to stormwater, as far as Clean California goes, is that we started looking at platforms or tools to help us with not only the deployment of forces, but also do our litter assessment. So, One of the big challenges for us is we're a stormwater permittee and the statewide permit, obviously in the trash amendments, which requires us to do visual assessments, or OBTAs for short. We also have to do quite a lot for Clean California. We need to verify how to effectively deploy our forces. So back in 2018, 2019, when I was in our environmental division, I started thinking about what are some ways to automate it, because the old way of doing things was to just drive. We had a consultant go out, and it took many weeks and almost months to actually just drive a right away and collect the scores and digitize them. So we got to thinking doing a pilot with computer vision, and that's what we talked a bit about in last week's Trash Datathon. But then as that began to grow, we did an initial pilot. This led now to today's pilot or coordination with Google. So they have a litter insights program, which we're developing together. It's part of their larger sustainability program, which they'll speak to shortly. But this will be one of the modules or applications. They have indicated that a part of it at least will be made public. They were also working with us to be more specific as far as highway data, highway imagery. And so the way it works is the Insights program would work with Google Street View imagery and then use their AI technologies to analyze them and identify trash, and then also generate a rating and then populate them as a heat map. And so the look and feel will be very familiar, kind of like Google Maps and heat maps. I'll show some demos, here shortly. And then, of course, then the heat maps would actually show trash levels, and that's again based on Street View using, their AI technologies. So with that, I saw Raina come on, and let's see if and Robert's on as well. So perfect timing. So I just gave the intro, Robert, Sujit, and Raina, and looks like we have a question. Do we maybe sure? I'll take this before we dive in. So it's going to be multifaceted in the sense of, yes, we're still pursuing and we're working very closely with our stormwater program. So there will be kind of the ongoing efforts with environmental around the full capture device. All that will still be ongoing, which is actually already a significant effort. And then to help that cause of this is in a way chasing it upstream. So actually doing the public education, the additional litter abatement to what maintenance normally does. And then also projects as far as actually beautification and the visual aspect of it, and also cleaning up, because these will be some of the sites that are highly impacted. So does that answer it? Let's see who sent the question. Yeah, Tony, did that get it? Okay, great. Thanks for the question. So with that, Robert and others and Google team, if you're on, then I can hand it over to you for the intro and presentation.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Walter. Before we jump in with the presentation, would love to know sort of the how this group is different from the one we presented last week, Walter, and like what would be most helpful for the group to discuss coming out of today's conversation. So maybe a little bit of background on the attendees would be great.
Sure, definitely. Shelley, do you want to chime in first, or since I'm happy as well.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for being here, Raina and your team. This is the trash monitoring work group. So a lot of similar people as the other day with the trash data dive, people who are working to solve our trash problems here in California, ranging from nonprofits to those that I call trash professionals, which are people who actually get paid to go out and survey trash or pick up trash, as well as municipalities and other folks. This group is more to inform policymakers and decision makers, and also to work together to come up with projects that will shorten the amount of work that's needed. So we work together. We're looking for things like funding to do joint projects, but we report to the Water Quality Monitoring Council for the State Water Resources Control Board. So we have a different focus than the group the other day, which only meets once a year. We meet more often, and we also have some different subcommittees that meet on a regular basis as well. Those subcommittees are the encampments, so a lot of work around homeless encampments, data group, which Walter is part of, and also our citizen science group. And we're also looking to add a microplastics group subcommittee as well.
Great. Thank you so much. That was super helpful, Shelley.
Awesome. I'm gathering that you can't see my screen. Is that correct? Or can you see my screen?
I'm seeing a blank screen, Robert.
Bummer. Sujit or Reina, are you able to pull up the deck here? I think I might have my permissions out of whack.
Ryan, do you have it handy or want me to?
No.
Okay, I can. Oh, okay. It shows now, Robert.
You can see it.
Oh, right now, screen. Okay, yeah, you can see it.
Excellent. Okay, cool here. Reina, you can drive the slides and I can do the voiceover here. So very excited to see you all here. Apologies for some of the duplicative nature of this if you were in the Trash Datathon last week, but we had a lot of fun sort of chatting through this platform here, which we're really excited to share with you and really excited to really just garner your feedback. And to Shelley's point, to gather information on who would be really most excited about leveraging this platform for which specific use cases. We're sort of at the point where we're standing up a minimum viable product and we're really looking for the folks who would be most excited about this. Jumping right in, 50 billion. Without jumping into this pop quiz, this is the number of pieces of litter that we have on US soil today. That's about 150 pieces per person here in the US. This number came from the most recent Keep America Beautiful litter study, aggregating all 700 affiliates review of litter on the streets. And it's a pretty massive problem that we know that we would like to tackle at scale. We know that litter has deep problems for infrastructure, whether we're looking at clogging stormwater drains or just being a public sort of nuisance that folks have to clean up. Definitely a large sort of impact on human and ecosystem health, whether it's breeding disease or escaping into our oceans. We know that it can have a severe impact all across the globe. On that kind of like circular economy climate nexus, we know that litter is just materials or waste out of place. We know that if we were able to better manage and keep materials in use, that would have a nice climate impact, well timed for COP26 this week. And then a whole slew of indirect impacts, everything from environmental injustice to impacting property values, broken window effect. Probably nobody on this call is a stranger to the different problems here. So moving along, what can we do about it? We know that a number of different cities are trying to understand the litter problem globally and locally. In these three sort of spheres, where is litter accumulating? How much is there? And what's the composition or the makeup of litter, either individual pieces or in piles? We know that there's been a number of different sort of approaches to catalog and tackle this under the sort of like pretense of what gets measured gets managed. In Los Angeles, the Bureau of Sanitation would drive 9,000 miles of streets and alleys to get a sort of manual litter score, similar to New York City. Thousands of miles of cars just zooming along, trying to get a sense of trash. In a very smaller city, right, Philadelphia took 8 months to complete their most recent litter index study, largely manual. And if you take sort of a sampling approach, you can also get an index of sorts, but it's wildly manual, and you probably miss a little bit here and there. So tackling this in a way that Google is better positioned for, we're aiming to sort of leverage the data that we're already capturing to illuminate where litter is accumulating with the most recent sort of imagery, as well as looking at where litter is accumulating or not, or ameliorating perhaps throughout time. Long and short, using Google Street View imagery, which is captured at varying sort of cadences. In larger cities, it's more often than in more rural environments, but probably at a minimum every 3 to 6 months. Leveraging that imagery and machine learning models to basically identify where litter is accumulating and then create a little heat map so that we can go ahead and better manage it. Moving along, we think there's a number of different benefits that this can kind of afford. This is more or less a mirror of that previous slide. Think in terms of policy and enforcement, looking from everything towards tackling illegal dumping to showcasing the benefits before and after, let's say, of individual targeted litter policy, like deposit return schemes in California CRV for bottles and cans, or plastic bag bans, or maybe the upcoming takeaway silverware bans. Can also guide infrastructure investment to make sure those dollars go to work in the areas that need it most. Illuminate and tackling environmental injustice, so showcasing where, when we overlay perhaps other demographic factors, we can sort of help out in that regard. Supporting healthy ecosystems and minimizing plastic waste into the ocean is something that is certainly a hot topic right now, and something that we feel very strongly about at Google, and would hope to help other partners who are concerned about that as well. So moving along, I think, yeah, this is a good time. I don't know how we're going to do this, passing the mic from Raina's screen to Sujit's screen, but would love to show a demo here. And if not, we have the GIFs in the other screen.
Yeah, I can start up with the demo, but if there are any quick questions, we can address them before jumping to the demo. Doesn't look like. All right. Can you all see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, great. So this is kind of the home page of the application we're building. This is from a prototype that we've built. So as you can see here, we start with a heat map color code, primarily of red being more litter, green being clean, and then you see a gradient of different colors in between, depending on the density of litter. This is in 2019. You see the year slider there. We can go back up to 5 to 6 years back in time to aggregate this information, so you get a good understanding of patterns. So this is 2019. Now, if you look at 2020, you see it's much more greener, so it's much less dense. So for example, Florida has gone from red to yellow. Missouri and Illinois is not red anymore. I'm guessing there's an externality of COVID. I guess maybe less people out in the streets and maybe less litter is my guess. So that kind of helps you give a good contrast of how litter is, the landscape is changing over time. This is a different view. In technical terms, it is called overlaying a heat map on a choropleth map, but it helps you understand where within the state is litter aggregating. So for example, if you see the whole of Texas red, it could be a little like misleading there, but now this gives you an insight as to where within Texas is litter accumulating. So from here, like peeling the layers of an onion, you can start zooming in. So I've zoomed into the Bay Area here. Gray basically means that those are areas where we don't have street view coverage. So the cars have not run, for example, in the Sierra National Forest. We mostly focus on like semi-rural and urban cities. And when you zoom in here, the aggregation of litter switches automatically from a state level to a zip code level. So here you see different zip codes assigned different color codes. And like peeling the layers of an onion, you zoom in further. This is zoomed into the Bay Area. Again, you see by zip code, you see different color codes assigned here. So you could see San Jose, Milpitas, East Bay, around the SF airport area, it's mostly red due to more litter there. The peninsula is mostly clean. So at this level, you could enable what we call as point results, and this pop-up will open up here. It'll help you see the litter from street view measuring. So I've pulled out a couple of examples here. This is in San Francisco. You see in 2020, you have, I guess it's an illegal dumping, if I would categorize it. So you see mattresses and sofas and stuff dumped here on the street. If you look at it in 2019, this was mostly clean. Not much there, just sparse litter here and there. But if you look at 2020, again, maybe an externality of COVID, but people have dumped their mattresses and sofas and whatnot. This is an example in San Francisco. This is an example in Oakland. You see a lot of litter, again, I guess, dumped illegally here on the street. This is an example in San Jose, where you see a litter, again, dumped here on the side of the highway. So again, yeah, this is the prototype that we've built. We'll plan to add more capabilities in the future, but curious to hear your feedback and if you have any questions.
I had one question for the group and would love to get your thoughts on like what you saw so far in the demo. Is this what you'd be looking for your own use cases? Or what kind of analytics or insights might be most helpful from a platform like this for your own work?
we don't have a lot of people speaking up today. You know, when I think about this app, the thing that was coming to my mind was, I'll turn it on you, is how can we help you with building out this, providing that kind of feedback? Is there, do you want us to test anything? Do you want us to is there anything that we can do to help you in developing this application?
Yeah, I think the core thing is we would like to develop with use cases in mind, and that's where, you know, the use case with California Stormwater Department, as well as California Department of Transportation, you know, for that we've been discussing, like the, you know, automating the OVTA assessments, for example. If that still is a valid use case or continues to be, how might, you know, the analytics you see on the platform right now, is that sufficient, or what kind of, you know, analytics do you need to track and report on, which would be helpful for, you know, for using this platform for you all.
Okay. One of the things that I can think of that really excites me about this application is, you know, the identification of those spots where we can focus to do cleanups and actually see an impact. So that to me is very exciting. And I guess the other question I would have for you is will there be the ability for people to add their own images to this tool to have them analyzed at some point?
Yes, we are planning to build those capabilities, especially because like the street view coverage that we have from a temporal standpoint, it varies depending on the geo. There is no fixed cadence at which we capture imagery. So it could be once every 3 months, every six months, etc. So I guess if you have more real-time data sources that you want to contribute to the platform, then we can run our machine learning models on your imagery and combine our data, your data, and create a single heat map, a single application out of that. Yes, that's something that we're considering for the future evolution of the platform.
That would be great. My thinking is that I could see us using this kind of thing, looking at our storm drains and our rivers and streams, and there's quite a few of us online that spend a lot of time in those areas looking at trash and doing assessments. And I think that would be very useful if we could take some pictures and put them through your software and get some feedback on that. That would be awesome.
Yeah, makes sense.
And for any kind of report, do you all do for any kind of reporting you do on trash, around trash, what is currently being reported, I guess? And we're trying to figure out if there are ways by which we can smartly sort of, you know, abstract insights around trash from this platform to help ease the burden of reporting on trash for this group. So curious on, like, what are you currently reporting on? Are you all focused on a specific area, and what kind of, you know, analytics might be helpful for reporting?
Yeah, that's $1 million question. Different groups are reporting different things. So I know when you guys reported or when you gave your presentation the other day that you were normalizing the data to kind of amount per, I think it was square mile, or what was it?
Square mile is what we're
Square
planning.
mile? Yeah. So some people are doing counts, some people are doing volume measurements, some people are doing just kind of visual assessment, saying, you know, between 0 and 12, this is how bad we think this site is looking. So everybody's doing a whole bunch of different things, but I think doing it the way you guys are doing it and being able to make, to come up with a number per a given area, it really makes sense and will allow us to make comparisons between different regions, certainly. So Sarah, did you have a question?
I was just going to say that I know I mentioned this at the last presentation, but I know for as it relates to Caltrans and the area where I work in San Diego, there's a lot of trash that's in the vegetated areas that are not visible by visual assessments from a vehicle or a drone or something like that. And I was thinking, I kind of, when Shelley was saying that maybe there's a way for other groups to contribute data in some way, there might be a room in that area to capture data that's being collected, that might be in addition to or to supplement or to ground truth some of the other data that is being collected through this tool. So just I guess a potential solution to that blind spot.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think, yeah, we definitely have blind spots. So I think any data that you could provide to augment that would make the platform more robust for sure.
Charlie, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering if rather than a resample based on a fixed time interval, if there could be a resample based on events, like say, for instance, a tornado, a hurricane, a flood, a COVID, any particular event that might generate more trash, might that change in the amount of trash might be good to monitor based on something other than a purely temporal interval.
Yep, that makes sense. I guess we'll have to marry kind of the temporal data we have with event data, but yeah, that as a use case definitely makes sense. Do you look at trash on an event basis in terms of your reporting or analysis? Just curious.
Yeah, we do monitoring based on rainfall.
Got it.
Is what we mostly do, and we consider we find differences between the first flush, meaning the first heavy rain after a dry period, versus steady rainfall. So even a large amount after steady rainfall may not bring as much trash as the first flush.
Makes sense. Yeah, I think in the other meeting we also heard about integrating wind data in terms of wind speeds and whatnot. So I think even data, wind data, etc., is additional metadata that we can incorporate in the future.
Yeah, wind data is important as well, especially for the lighter materials. Although a lot of the stuff, do you have any way of telling whether the material is deposited by human activity or by natural forces?
I guess we'll have to make some inferences to draw those conclusions. So for example, I guess if it's next to a school or a park, for example, I guess it's safe to assume that it's human activity, if not elsewhere. So yeah, we'll have to think about how to make those inferences.
How frequently do you all report on trash for your work? Is that typically once a year or once a quarter? What is typically the reporting cadence?
Anybody want to tackle that? There's a comment in the chat saying most municipal stormwater programs report annually.
Got it.
And so,
weekly,
yeah. There's also a question from Jenny Stevenson above that. Basically, she says, this looks really great. Does it mainly capture large dumping, or can it also reflect pieces of litter in gutters?
It depends on the size of the pieces of litter. I guess anything as small as a plastic bottle, like a 500 ml plastic bottle or a plastic bag, can be identified. But I think smaller than that, like cigarette butts, etc., sorry, are very hard because of the resolution of our imagery. So I would kind of cap it out at something as small as a plastic bottle or a plastic bag.
And going back to annual reporting, now, does it, when you all report annually, do the assessments have to happen at roughly the same time every year, or can they be varied? The reason I ask is, like, our street view cards, they run with, some varying cadence, and while they mostly run annually, like it's possible that, one year they might run in April and the other year they might run in July, etc. Would that be an issue, or it works as long as it's like done once every year?
Anybody from Region 4 want to chime in, or? looks like there's a comment. We perform biannual trash assessments for our non-traditional small MS4 once in the rainy season and once in the dry season. We perform them in between trash pickup events. So I would suspect that there's some flexibility with many of these groups in being able to do their surveys.
Gotcha. That's helpful.
Anybody else have any questions?
Sorry, just one more question, I guess, from my side, if others don't have a question. Do you all, in terms of what area you're focusing on for your trash assessments, I imagine everybody here has their own kind of assigned geography or, you know, like whatever that is, like a city or municipality to focus on. And if that's the case, like right now, I think all of our data is basically color coded by zip codes. We've also heard census tracts as potentially another way, by which to kind of color code, litter volumes. Is there any preference for one way or the other? Like, does it matter whether it's zip codes or census tracts, etc.? And how do folks like to kind of review their specific geo? Do they like to zoom in into different parts? Like anything related to geo, and what level of granularity would make sense?
Sarah mentions watershed might be a good delineation. Go ahead, Anjani.
Hi, yes, this is Angina from Region 4, LA office. I have a couple comments. So when I saw the presentation slide showing the 2019 versus 2020 trash level on a specific land, I wanted to also make a comment that it also depends on frequency of trash pickups for that city or for that area. And then it depends when that picture was taken. Was it taken right after street sweeping? What days are the street sweepings for that municipality is being done? So if it's a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of every week, so you have to take the picture the same time every time, just to get a better comparison of the trash generation rate for that specific area. Another thing in terms of reporting for trash, it depends if the area is subject to a trash TMDL or if it is covered under a statewide trash provision policy. So for statewide trash areas, for areas that are subject to statewide trash policy, our permittees have to monitor and report on their PLUs, PLU being priority land uses. So the areas that have higher generation rate for trash. So that's monitoring for PLU areas under statewide trash policy. But for our region, we have several, like I think 13, 14 trash TMDLs for different watersheds. And what we ask for our permittees is, so if an area or catch basin is covered with a full trash capture, full capture systems, they don't really have to monitor. They just have to go inspect and then clean out the catch basin, the device as needed. But for areas not covered with full capture systems and covered with partial capture devices or nothing at all, they have to just keep monitoring and apply institutional controls. So, and then in terms of reporting, we do have annual reporting requirements that they just have to report using our reporting forms. Yeah.
That's super helpful. Thank you so much.
Reporting would be at the end of, for us, it would be at the end of each year, December 15th. And then it would just come in with the regular annual reporting forms.
Great, thank you. So I want to thank our presenters, thank the Google Cloud team, much appreciation. Would love to help you guys out in any way we can. Please let us know if there's any way we can interact with you and help. We're open to that, and thank you very much.
Appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really
Yeah,
helpful
definitely. Thank
discussion.
you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for your feedback. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Walter. All right, next on our agenda, we have Megan Walsh. She is an associate professor at the School of Public Affairs, San Diego State University. And her research is, her goal of her research is to inform community-based responses to poverty and criminal legal contact that are rooted in people's wisdom about their own lives, needs, and humanity. Her current research focuses on the health and sanitation needs of people experiencing homelessness, the criminalization of poverty, and racialized policing. I would like to welcome Megan Walsh. Thank you for being with us today.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Shelley, and everyone for having me. I have some slides, so I will go ahead and share my screen. I also have a whole lot of data to share with you all and not a lot of time. So I have dropped the slides to my presentation in the chat as well, so that you have those data to refer to. And I look forward to questions and discussion at the end. So here we go. So thank you, Shelley, so much for that introduction. Just a little bit about me. My background is in social work, and then my doctorate is in criminal justice. And so I'm a social scientist who really in recent years, my work has moved more and more closely towards kind of the interactions of homelessness and the environment. And I spend a lot of time thinking about how can we protect and preserve our natural environment, and also do so while respecting the dignity and addressing the needs of people experiencing homelessness. So I'm going to share all my academic papers with you at the end so that you have those as a reference. They're linked at the end of the slideshow. And then here on the right are some links to some more public, less academic jargony writing that I've done recently on these topics. So I believe the reason Shelley asked me to speak with this group is because much of my research has centered around homelessness, and in particular understanding impacts of homelessness on our natural environment, and how we can address those impacts in humane ways. So I have completed recently with many colleagues at SDSU a very interdisciplinary study of homelessness along the San Diego River, where my colleagues in environmental engineering looked at whether there are impacts to water quality of the San Diego River based on homeless encampments along those rivers. My colleagues found no effects to the water quality, and we can discuss that later. As part of that study, my colleague Sean Flanagan and I conducted interviews with nearly 100 people staying in San Diego's rivers and canyons. I'm going to show you some results of that study today. Another study that I will share some data from briefly is a study that we ran last summer a remote survey of people experiencing homelessness on how they were surviving during the initial shelter-in-place orders during the COVID-19 pandemic. And then at the end, I'll share with you two kind of current and upcoming projects that myself and other colleagues at SDSU are working on. And so we would love to be in contact with any folks working across the state on these issues. So I'm currently leading a regional needs assessment of public bathroom facilities in San Diego County, where we are developing, to our knowledge, a first of its kind database of all public bathroom facilities, with the ultimate goal of trying to identify where we need more facilities. You will see that theme coming up in my data that I will share with you. And then lastly, in partnership with the San Diego River Park Foundation, SDSU recently got some grant funds from NOAA to study solid waste debris in our San Diego River. And my piece will be looking at behaviors of people staying along the river in terms of trash management, recycling as a survival strategy, and how we can think of better solutions to these issues. So I will not prolong the context slide here. I'm sure folks on this call are aware of our housing affordability crisis and the interrelated crisis of homelessness in our state of California. And then speaking here from San Diego in particular, housing is incredibly expensive here, and the number of new homeless folks in our county doubled since the onset of the pandemic. And we know that homelessness rises fastest in these communities where housing is very challenging to afford, which we know applies to a lot of communities across California. And this is where kind of the impacts on the environment start to show up. Our partners at the San Diego River Park Foundation have documented hundreds of percentages of increase in the instance of homelessness along the San Diego River here. We saw about a 300% increase in folks staying along the river during a hepatitis A outbreak that hit us hard here in 2017 and 2018. And then since the pandemic, in earlier stages of the pandemic, the River Park Foundation saw an increase of upwards of 500%. Of folks staying in encampments along the river. And my pitch to you today is that policing and criminalization is a substantial driver of folks interacting with our natural environment more and more, because as my data will show, unsheltered people base their daily survival decision-making practices around avoiding police. And this has impacts on both health and environment. So the first study data that I am sharing with you here, again, started out of work with the San Diego River Park Foundation. Our students went out and participated in trash mapping events with the Park Foundation. And volunteered for trash cleanup events and things like that. And through being able to understand the data that the River Park Foundation gathers, we were, as researchers, were able to get a sense of where are folks staying along our river and how best might we engage in research outreach to those folks to solicit their views, perspectives, and experiences. So this is an old map of where former encampments existed. Here's some of our students out and about, and a more zoomed in map into the SDSU area, which got special attention from us in our research project, given that we're a community-based research university. I'll go very quickly through the demographics of who we spoke with. You can see those there, and I'm happy to answer questions about that. But basically, we succeeded in trying to oversample for folks who were staying in the riverbed, along canyons, in vehicles, and otherwise identifying as staying outside, so that we could really hear folks' kind of needs and perspectives. So why do people stay along waterways? There has been very little research about this particular human environment domain of interaction. So we know of one other study aside from ours that has really looked at this, but there are many reasons. So proximity to water, sense of place, seeking safety, that was a strong theme that came out in our interviews, a related need to avoid law enforcement, other displacement and cleanup activities happening in our more urban areas. And in San Diego's case, folks who are familiar with San Diego, our trolley and one of our major freeways runs parallel to the river. So folks also had a reason to stay adjacent to the river to be close to amenities. And then lastly, one of our participants shared with us, you know, the police don't bother you as much out here as they do downtown. Every day you'll have an encounter with the police in the city. So we asked folks who they had interacted with in the past 30 days. And my main takeaway to you here is that especially for folks who are staying more out in nature, their primary point of contact, if they interact with someone, it's going to be an environmental organization, in large part because people are trying to avoid policing. And homelessness service providers, this is changing in San Diego recently, but historically homelessness service providers have been too strapped and maxed out on resources and concerned for their own safety and well-being. And so going out and, you know, hiking a mile along a river to conduct outreach was viewed as inefficient for these service providers. So that's a kind of a substantial takeaway there. Here's a slide that just gives some qualitative data on how and why people think about avoiding the police and how that may lead them to stay in more out in nature. So folks told us things like that the police are the only ones who make them feel unsafe. We had many instances of people describing the police throwing all their stuff away, people losing important medications for both health and mental health, people losing work uniforms, tools, and other things that people need on the job to keep working. And so these kind of sweeps and other policing behaviors people view as a real threat. So as a result, folks described wanting to stay off the radar from police. I lost my stuff because it was taken away by cops, etc. So we asked folks a series of questions about their sanitation and hygiene practices. And there were a lot of key takeaways from this study, but I've highlighted a couple notable ones here, which is that folks, especially who are staying out in nature, are heavily relying on restaurants to meet their basic needs or business establishments. So if you're looking to use a bathroom at a gas station or a Starbucks, oftentimes there are gatekeepers. Either you have to buy something or the place isn't open 24/7. So people who are reliant on businesses have very limited access. And as a result, that second line in yellow, you can see that particularly for the people we spoke with who are staying out in nature somewhere, nearly 3/4 reported to us engaging in open defecation. And here's why. Oftentimes bathrooms, so we had folks tell us things like going to the bathroom in the day is not an issue, the night's the issue. We had women tell us that they feel more vulnerable, that their safety is threatened due to lack of access of bathrooms, particularly at night. We asked folks whether they really think about and change their daily schedule or habits out of concern for accessing bathrooms or water. And heartbreakingly, we got many responses where folks said, no, I don't really think about that, or I don't change my habits because my entire daily schedule or my whole system is built on how I access water. So this is really shaping people's everyday decision making. And then lastly, when folks we weren't directly asking people about their trash management habits in this study, but it is definitely going to serve as pilot data for our future study, because folks described having to leave things behind in order to leave an encampment sweep or to obey police orders to be displaced, to move along. People told us that they very clearly recognized that because they don't have adequate trash disposal facilities, that they recognize that they don't think the public would hate us as much if we didn't look or smell dirty and leave trash everywhere. And then the last kind of trash environment takeaway from this study is that nearly half of our respondents reported relying solely on purchased bottled water to meet their needs, because public water fountains have kind of gone the way of public bathrooms in that water is hard to access. So this has major environmental implications, right, if folks are relying on bottled water. And then some brief takeaways from our study last summer. So the San Diego Police Department continues to, and was throughout the pandemic, continues to displace, ticket, and arrest people for what we would call kind of status offenses or crimes that are as a result of their homelessness. So we have made it illegal to live in your car, for example, in the city of San Diego. You cannot park overnight on any city of San Diego street. We also have a law called encroachment on public right-of-way that was actually written for wayward trash dumpsters, but is used against people experiencing homelessness who are sleeping on the street. So there's a lot of criminalization that happens, and you see the sign here. This is a typical 3-hour notice that you'll see. And if you aren't with your stuff when the cleanup happens, oftentimes you permanently lose it. So you can see our methods here. We surveyed nearly 250 folks. We used remote survey technology, so people with cell phones, they didn't have to be smartphones, could text their responses to us. And then we did follow-up written interviews. And so I'll move pretty quickly through these results, and you can look at them on your own time, but you may be interested in things like what are folks experiencing homelessness doing for income right now? You'll see that a large number of them are working or employed at least part-time. You can see the demographics of kind of where folks were when we surveyed them. And we asked folks, what is the primary reason why you stay or sleep where you do? And to be close to bathrooms and safety were primary reasons that folks gave us for that. Of folks that we surveyed who are living in their vehicle, 27% had their vehicle towed since the shelter-in-place order had gone into effect. That is an astoundingly high number or rate of kind of criminal legal contact. Here's another slide that summarizes what folks reported of their police interactions. And an astounding 80% of the folks that we surveyed had been in contact with the police at least once. And many had received, as you can see, tickets for parking and illegal lodging violations. This topic also has an enormous racial justice component to it. In San Diego, Black and African American San Diegans account for about 6% of our general population, but between 21 and 30% of our unsheltered population. And so you can see here that when we break it down by race, for our Black respondents exclusively, more than a quarter had experienced an arrest or a ticket since the shelter-in-place order went into effect. We did some follow-up interviews with folks who took our survey. And so these are the demographics of the people we spoke with. And so you can see the breakdown. We spoke with a lot of people who were couch surfing, staying in their car, and a temporary shelter. And so I just wanted to leave you with people's words, because they're often very powerful and far more insightful than anything an academic could come up with. And so here's what people had to say when we asked them about their experiences with the police. We asked folks, so the San Diego Police Department has an explicit policy that if an officer encounters someone that they believe to be homeless, that they should offer them resources. And so we asked folks if an officer during their encounters had offered them resources. 12% of our interviewees said that that had happened, and none of our Black interviewees had experienced a police officer offering them resources. People shared with us stories of police officers using racist and homophobic slurs towards them, police officers shouting "Blue Lives Matter" in response to Black Lives Matter protests of last summer. People described just a general feeling of loss of humanity, lack of respect, and then, of course, punitive action that has huge consequences on unsheltered folks. So when folks get their car towed, that means that they're losing their home, right? And so folks really expressed these heartbreaking frustrations with the police activity that happens here. And as a result, folks describe conscious police avoidance, trying to avoid police as much as possible. As one person put it, the best interaction is no interaction. And so there is a profound lack of trust, and as a result, an avoidance of social services, especially when they are accompanied by a police officer. And folks described us just not feeling uncomfortable. And so over here on the left, I've given you from the San Diego Police Department, this is their progressive enforcement model, where they claim to offer shelter at every point. And then you can see kind of the escalating, kind of criminalizing component that comes along with that, where it can ramp up from a ticket, which folks often can't afford to pay, to the potential for arrest. So lastly, some implications of the data that we've been gathering suggest that policing has a direct impact on what we're seeing in our natural environment, particularly around trash and open defecation. Oftentimes folks are moving into more remote areas in order to avoid law enforcement and the consequences of contact with police. This harms public health because we have folks avoiding social services and participating in open defecation as a result of not staying places where there are sanitation facilities, and criminalization does not solve homelessness. So the implications of our work are around integrating the values of harm reduction, basic dignity, and respect into our social policy. So when I speak with groups such as yourselves, I really encourage folks to think about what are some of the policies and laws that we have on the books in our communities that are punishing and criminalizing life-sustaining behaviors, such as open defecation, and how can we think about implementing non-police interventions that really center and prioritize public health and safety for everyone. My next steps in my own research, as I mentioned, is to really dig deeper into the bathroom issue. So we are mapping all facilities in the San Diego region and really trying to figure out how can we expand our sanitation infrastructure? How could trash management also be included in expanding that infrastructure? And then through the NOAA grant, I'll be really looking more deeply into kind of the intersection of trash management and homelessness. What are folks' practices around trash management currently? What role does policing play? And how can trash management, recycling, and homelessness outreach be better integrated? So thank you so much for your time. Here's some thanks to our partners. These are my wonderful collaborators. And then at the end of the slide, I've given you all our more dense researchy references. You can read more if you would like. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Megan. That was amazing. I never even knew about the criminalization of the unhoused and all that stuff. I guess a real quick question for me is, what can we do as trash practitioners that, those environmentalists that actually have contact with the unhoused people? What can we do to better interact with them and let them know that we're there to provide support? I know in my case, when we've been doing research, we go out, and if there is a homeless encampment or an encampment nearby, we usually just steer clear of it. Is there something specific we can do that would make them feel more comfortable with having us around?
Well, first of all, Shelley, thank you for asking that question. I would say that I have learned a lot from the San Diego River Park Foundation in terms of how to answer your question. So they are, when I've gone out to do volunteer work with them, I have always been consistently impressed with how all of their volunteers and staff, first of all, speak with people first language, and then really kind of embody the idea that wherever an unsheltered person is staying, that is their home. So treat it with respect, treat it as if it was your own doorstep, and then kind of have that mental idea as you're engaging with folks. So yeah, I would say, respectfully keeping a distance, especially during Corona times, is kind of the first priority, because we know that unsheltered folks tend to have much poorer overall health and probably, weaker immune systems than those of us who are housed. So protecting them is real important. And then respect. So if folks do want to engage, having that conversation. I know that folks at the San Diego River Park Foundation really develop relationships with the folks that they see regularly, and making it clear from the first encounter that you are not a police agency, I think is super, super important. And so I don't know, I know Sarah's on the call. Sarah, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I so admire the work and training that you all do around this issue. So I just wanted to hand it off to you if you wanted to share.
Sure, thanks, Megan. And thanks for adding all this stuff. I mean, I think that the thing that I think I'm glad that is the takeaway when you volunteer with us is that we really want to make sure that people go in with the mindset that we're walking into somebody's place of where they're living at that moment. And so it's like not that different than walking into someone's living room. So you have to imagine that they're going to be potentially defensive of their space and like concerned that we're there for another reason. So we always make a point of announcing that we are part of the San Diego River Park Foundation. We're just passing through, we're doing an environment survey. And that way we can hopefully diffuse any of that concern like right from the get-go. And it's true also, as an organization, we do sometimes work with police, but we never want to be aligned working side by side with police in the riverbed, just partly for the safety of our volunteers and so that we can have that, that ability to have some discourse without having anybody have that concern that we are aligned with somebody. And I think the other thing we really try to do is not with every volunteer, but at least with our leaders, is make sure that folks have some first aid and conflict resolution training, just because there's a probability that over the course of a year that we may encounter somebody who's having a medical emergency, or that we are going to encounter somebody who's having like a mental health emergency. And it's helpful if our staff can do something other than just like run away and get the volunteers out of there. If they're able to be in a position to potentially intervene, not necessarily to be a first responder, but at least to be in a position to like stabilize the situation and engage first responders. We've had that come up multiple times, and I think it's an unfortunate part, but at the same time, if people are living out of the, off the radar, I think we've been in a few occasions where, like, I'm not a doctor, but I suspect we may have been the reason why an intervention arrived in time. And I think it's important to be prepared for those kinds of things in the riverbed.
That's great. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you, Megan. I'm gonna take one more question and then we'll move on. We're a little behind. Gary, do you have a question?
Megan, thanks so much for those insights. That was really interesting, particularly the increase you'd observed through the pandemic. I think a lot of us in our own cities, we haven't been counting, but we have an intuitive sense of the escalation of this problem. My question is, it sounds like most of the interactions that you're describing with these people are with police, and it may be with municipal staff as well. So I'm wondering, did you interview police or municipal staff that need to go into these areas for various reasons to hear what these challenges are from their side and get that perspective also? Thanks.
Yes, thank you. Great question. So for the first study that I presented, the river study, we interviewed 7 to 8 homelessness service providers in the San Diego region. So we didn't speak with police officers, although I have done interview studies with police as well. So I can speak to that a little bit. But the key takeaways from kind of the key informants or key stakeholders that we spoke with, along with the folks staying along the river for that study, was really what I mentioned about lack of resources and concern for staff safety. So outreach, and I would say the same likely goes for the police as well. Outreach and doing work along the river, as you all know, it can be incredibly time consuming, labor intensive, and then you've got safety concerns on top of it. So historically, homeless service providers have really, at least in San Diego, have really neglected the river, and that is now changing. But oftentimes the trap that we then fall into, which I guess is just more kind of food for thought for you all, is if we rely on the police still to provide us safety during that social service outreach time, a lot of folks still aren't going to want to engage because of issues with the police and the way police officers shape interactions. And that's due to their training. And so I would say, and the other thing I would say about police officers is police do not want to be in the business of solving homelessness. They are not equipped to do so. That is not why they get into the job. And so my experience is that police officers are often eager for other folks to take up this work, but by default, they are put up as first responders to homelessness. And so my hope is that folks think more expansively about who can take on this work. I think another notable finding from our work is that for folks staying along the river, their main point of contact is an environmental service organization, not a homeless service provider or police. And so, you know, I've been real inspired by the work of the Park Foundation and other environmental organizations across the state who are really learning how to manage homelessness because they've been confronted by it. And so I think really talking and learning from each other around these best practices could be a great next place to go. So I'm excited to speak with your group for that reason. Thank you for the question.
Thank you so much, Megan, for your presentation and talking with our group today. It's been very enlightening, and I'm sure we will have many more questions as we're going back out and starting to go back out in the field. So thank you again. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And I'll stay on and just answer a few more questions in the chat, and I'll also put my email address in there. Thank you all.
Awesome. Thank you. Next up is Scott Coffin, Dr. Scott Coffin with the State Water Resources Control Board. He's going to talk about microplastics, and we have an interest in starting a microplastics subcommittee. And so he's going to give us kind of an introduction to the topic, and then we'll take a brief poll, and then we'll get going. So Scott, take it away. Scott is, I call him Dr. Microplastics because he's all things microplastics at the State Water Board. So go for it.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Shelley. And right when I wanted to open my slides, PowerPoint crashed. So just hang with me one moment. I'm just going to restart the app.
Awesome.
Alrighty, so it looks like PowerPoint doesn't want to work for me right now, so I'm just going to pull up the PDF that I made as a backup. Good thing I did that.
Okay.
Alrighty. Really interesting work, by the way, Megan. It's amazing to see how interconnected all of these issues are, environmental and social justice issues. We can't just work in a vacuum, so it's really enlightening to hear your work on that. So I'm going to be covering the formation of a new microplastics subcommittee. So really excited about this new development. As a reminder, for those of you that are not totally familiar, we have two recent bills from the legislature that are requiring the State Water Resources Control Board to focus on microplastics. We have SB 1263 to develop a statewide microplastic strategy for the aquatic environment, collaborating with the Ocean Protection Council. We also have Senate Bill 1422, which is more focused on drinking water, but has some monitoring associated with it, as well as developing of methods. So in terms of methods, there are so many available, and they're rapidly evolving. And it would be great if we can have some sort of forum that can allow folks that are working on these methods, either developing them or implementing them, to have a way to exchange information about what works, what doesn't, things that they're experiencing along the way. I want to give you a brief overview of the monitoring goals that the California Ocean Protection Council and State Water Board have in the foreseeable future. So for the marine environment, as well as drinking water, there are different drivers for monitoring, as well as different applications that are going to be required. So just, I know it's a very detailed table here, but just in brief, we are either going to be looking for where the risks are, like where the most microplastics are, or the types of microplastics that are most risky or hazardous, as well as how they get there, the sources and pathways. And for each of these different questions, we're going to use different methods. ranging from something like a manta trawl that's like quick and dirty with maybe Nile red and microscopy, all the way to, if we want to determine exactly where the plastic came from and who made it, then we might use some sophisticated forensics tools, a suite of analytical chemistry. And not with microplastics, not all methods are created equally, and not all of them will get you all of the information you want. So it's really important to have an understanding of exactly what type of method you're going to be using, and understanding the pros and cons of those. One of the concepts that I think we're going to be with for a long time, at least until we get the methods that we really want, is this idea that we're going to need to use some statistics to make relationships between different particles that we measure in the environment. And one of the ways that we're using this right now is in the concept of doing risk assessments. A lot of the lab studies are using different particle types than what we actually find in the environment. And typically labs use like a single particle type, whereas in the environment they use a distribution. You see a distribution of particle types. And there's been some recent techniques developed by mostly Albert Coleman's lab to use probability distributions to relate different particles that we find, or the effects in a laboratory, to what we find in the environment. And these tools are really elegant. They can allow you to relate monitoring data from different sizes to risks that occur for particles in other sizes. And right now there's a substantial mismatch between the sizes of particles that we're looking at in the environment versus what we're actually testing in labs. So we're looking at a lot of nanoparticle toxicity studies and trying to relate that to 50 micron particles in the environment, and you can't actually relate the two. But using these probability distributions, we can get a little bit closer. And just to give you an example of how this would actually work, if you're trying to relate a grab sample, let's say you take a 1 liter grab sample and you're able to characterize particles down to 20 microns. You can reliably extrapolate how many particles you'd find if you were to go all the way down to 1 micron using these probability distributions. And it's a very simple formula. Once you know the distribution, the power law, you can just plug in this very simple formula and you get basically a correction factor, a single number that you multiply by. And so this is an elegant tool that we can use in many cases to reduce the amount of resources needed. We don't always need to use a technique that can get us down to 1 micron particles. Now, there are a lot of caveats to this. The first is that these distributions are compartment specific. So if you're trying to make these alignments, you really do need a technique that can get you down to 1 micron, or as small as you possibly can get with ultra high resolution data, because you need to characterize that distribution first in order to make these alignments. And if you're looking at a compartment that has been altered, manipulated somehow, like treated drinking water, the distributions are not going to hold. You really have to use a technique that can actually look at those particles smaller than whatever is being filtered out. So that's just one of the concepts that I want to make sure everyone's like really well aware of. One of the things that we're going to be using for a while. On the other end of the spectrum is using extremely sophisticated techniques to source ID and figure out where these particles are coming from. So right now we have a project with Dr. Roxana Suring in Canada, who's combining lots of different analytical chemistry tools like non-target mass spec, carbon isotope dating, scanning electron microscopy, and even more, and building a machine learning algorithm that can hopefully identify not only what type of product it is, but who made it and where the petroleum source is. So eventually we can move upstream and actually have some accountability here. So as you can see, there's a suite of different methods, and we really need a group that can have a dialogue about these and exchange resources about this rapidly moving field. So if we were to put on a spectrum, all the different types of techniques that one could use in terms of the cost, on one end, you have a very simple thing, just doing a manta trawl and looking under a microscope and sub-selecting with tweezers particles and putting them on a benchtop FTIR, relatively low cost compared to everything else. Whereas if you have a goal for looking in treated drinking water, you're going to need a much more sophisticated instrument. And then on the upper end, you want, for those particle distributions, you're probably going to want like a focal plane array FTIR. So I'll give you a little bit more background on how our research at the State Water Board has informed a lot of these monitoring goals. A lot of you are probably familiar with the health effects workshop that we held over the past year. I'm just going to give some very brief highlights from this that inform the monitoring strategies that we have. Overall, we have relatively high confidence in our ability to assess risks in aquatic ecosystems. You can see on the plot here, this is a survey of the experts that were involved in the workshop. They have a high level of confidence in our framework for assessing risks and in the analytical process that we use for assessing risks. This means that we're going to be focusing a lot on risk characterization moving forward in the marine environment, as we feel pretty confident about the hazard ID that we've set up. For drinking water, we asked the question in a little bit of a different way, which is basically, which type of drinking water regulation do you think is appropriate given the current state of the science? And overwhelmingly, people said, do not come up with a regulation right now that would have any sort of enforcement involved. Notification levels, public health goals, the science is far from ready. So just to give you like a relative idea about the state of the science with that, if you weren't already aware. For ecotox, we use what's called a species sensitivity distribution to assess risks. I'm not going to go into super detail with that here, just to show you that this is sort of the techniques that we're using. And when you apply the ecotoxicity thresholds that we see in the database, so where we're actually seeing effects, if you compare that to what we actually see in the environment, there's actually a significant overlap here. And so this is like a very broad brushstroke global risk assessment, just looking at two overlapping types of data here, but you can see that there probably are places in the world where risk is being exceeded for certain species. And we want to make sure, we want to go out and actually do some risk characterization here in California as part of the Ocean Protection Council's directive from the legislature. When it comes to drinking water, we have a more iterative short-term approach where we're really just trying to get a handle on what is out there, what's in source water, what might be treated, and it's going to be a very targeted 4-year approach where we're going to look at several water systems and for the first 2 years, get laboratories accredited, get everybody more familiar with these methods, and collect some preliminary data, and then have a second phase where we may do additional monitoring. As Shelley mentioned, we had a 3-hour kickoff meeting for the Microplastics Monitoring Subcommittee, September. If you missed that, I can drop the link for the recorded video in the chat. It was a really fun, great way to get up to speed on all of the things happening, the state of the science, the agency needs. So really fun. It seems like there's a lot of interest in this sort of committee. So I'm putting forward here a straw man for what I think the California Microplastics Monitoring Subcommittee could be. And I'd like to get people's responses or their thoughts on this. So the overall goal, as I see it, is that this committee would be a local and global community exchange for information and data for microplastics monitoring methods and tools. So anybody can join, and really the goal is to collaborate with one another and share resources. Some immediate interests that we have, and one that actually didn't make it into the slide, which Shelley came up with, which is the actually developing a playbook. So this would be some type of document, a living document of somehow that would have a compilation of resources that would include, you know, the what, the why, the how for all of these different types of methods, and it would be based largely on the trash monitoring playbook. Some of the things that we could nest into that, or that we could focus on in the near term, are discussing the SQUIRP methods that we developed for drinking water. Those are out on the street right now. They're on our webpage. investigating surrogate monitoring techniques, so getting some more rapid techniques online for monitoring microplastics that might be cheaper than what's out there currently. Also discussing ASTM D883-220, which is the standardized collection method for monitoring microplastics in any type of water. Right now it's being applied for wastewater, and Jared Voskel from CASA here can speak a little bit to that. He's actually going out, a lot of his colleagues are going out to the field and collecting microplastics in wastewater right now. And so there's a lot of momentum happening with that, a lot of insights that can be shared with the rest of the community, as well as getting laboratories prepared for ELAP accreditation. So I'm sure there's a couple labs here online that are interested in getting accredited for monitoring microplastics. So this could be a good forum to share information and get up to speed on that, as well as any other interests that you all might have. I mentioned sharing data and tools. I think this could be a really great forum for that, something that we could host by, through the playbook, be able to get make these easily findable and shareable. And also discuss future method standardization projects. I mentioned the one that we just wrapped up with the methods with many labs listed here. Just to give you an update on that, if you're not directly involved in method standardization, we are wrapping up the method standardization for ocean water, fish tissue, and sediment late this year, early next year. You'll be hearing more about that. So really exciting. Once these methods are fully standardized and online, ELAP will eventually provide accreditation for those matrices as well. So if you want to do monitoring outside of the drinking water realm, just to let you know, that'll be coming out soon. I mentioned before surrogates. So the rationale for developing surrogates is that some of these methods are really expensive and time consuming. And we came up with a list of surrogates through our work group that could be useful, rapid tools that could indicate whether or not you have a microplastics issue. And we need collaborators, we need volunteers to help use these tools. Some of these are really cheap and water systems already have them. They're collecting the data automatically. And so that could be something that we could just leverage those existing resources with. Also, the ASTM method I mentioned before, if we have time to discuss that, I'd love to hear Jared's thoughts on that a little bit more. And finally, accreditation, as I mentioned before. So I want to be cognizant of time. And just if we have time for discussion, Shelley, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I think let's take a few minutes to discuss, and then we're going to be running just a few minutes late. But I thought it was really important to let Megan finish up on the unhoused folks. It was a great presentation, and I definitely want to let Scott get some feedback. This is an important topic. And we definitely want to consider adding a microplastics subcommittee to our group. So yeah, let's discuss it.
Hi, this is Jared Voskel with CASA, and Scott had mentioned some of the work we're doing, and I'm very supportive of the idea of having this informational exchange. Just for reference, the OPC funded a study in June to collect samples at POTWs. And over the summer and this fall, we've been piloting that at several agencies using the ASTM collection method. The initial experience was it was pretty novel, and it wasn't something that our folks were used to doing. It requires kind of a 24-hour collection process where you're standing by the monitoring sieve stacks. And depending on where you're sampling from in a wastewater treatment plant, you might need, to be there like every 20 minutes or so to watch it, because the sieve stack would clog, which, we didn't really, members were going out to do this. When they discovered it, kind of changed just logistically how they prepared. And I think in one case, they were having to stay out there overnight, and this was for primary effluent. So it's, pretty thick, pretty gnarly. The smell's not so great. And they had to stand by this thing to go to that effort. And so what we keep hearing from our general managers of our member agencies is they need something that's simpler, that's easier. Us, the tension is, well, do you compromise on accuracy? Because that's important to us as well, as we want to have a reliable reading. And so SCORP and Charles Wong there has been great troubleshooting this, as well as Bill Roberson and Harry Allen, who are, I think, pioneering the method itself and just trying to figure out solutions. But I definitely am supportive of this information exchange, and in another meeting or at another time, I could share some photos and some graphics of just what our folks are seeing. And I think Scott may be able to put in the chat a link to an instructional kind of how-to video that Central Contra Costa Sanitary District, Central San prepared for other agencies. So, but thanks for the presentation, and I like this dialogue.
Great. What I would like to do right now is release a poll. I'm hoping this is kind of a foregone conclusion that everybody's okay with creating this subcommittee, but I want to go ahead and launch this poll. Go ahead and respond before people start leaving. And then I'll let Scott continue the conversation, and I'll also put up I'll share my screen and put up a link to a doodle poll for the first microplastics subcommittee. Go ahead, Scott.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Shelley. Yeah, I just wanted to mention that the video that Jared is talking about with the microplastics sampling and wastewater is a really good example of one of the tools and resources that we can develop and share through these working groups. It's like a 15-minute video that shows you like exactly how to do wastewater sampling. And if there was like a central repository for all of these types of resources, I think it'd be like super useful for our community. Suzanne, did you have anything to say?
No, not at this time. Just making sure you knew I was here.
Good to see you. I like your hair.
Sorry, my hair is blue.
I love it.
So no surprises. We're at 100% yes on creating microplastics subcommittee. So I think we're good to go. I guess in the interest of getting people out of here, I posted a link to a doodle poll. Please fill that out. We're looking to have the first microplastics subcommittee meeting early December, and so please, if you're interested in attending, we'll send that link out as well with the link to the recording of this meeting as in addition to that. And real quickly, I really wanted to let you guys know we were going to have updates from our subcommittees, but I don't want to keep you too long. And basically, if you have questions about our subcommittees or you want to become part of one of them, please contact these people. If you're interested in leading the citizen science group, let me know. I hate to see that group go away. And if you have any general questions, please let me know and contact me via my email on this slide as well. If there's no other questions or no other comments, then I'd say let's go ahead and call it, and everybody have a great day.
Thanks, Shelley. Thanks everyone for coming.
Yes, thank you.